I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blimke.
And you're listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. You can now listen to all of our episodes and see show notes at FriendlyAtheistPodcast.com. Nancy French is a 4-time New York Times best-selling author who has written books with Sarah Palin, Bristol Palin, The Bachelor star Sean Lowe, and Olympic gold medalist Shawn Johnson. So, Nancy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you're arguably one of the most successful ghostwriters right now with the 4 New York Times bestsellers. And that's the word I've heard associated with you, a ghostwriter. And I'm wondering, do you take offense at that word? I wonder if you feel it detracts from your own contributions, or is that just part of the package?
Oh, no. I'm technically supposed to be called a celebrity collaborator.
Is that the euphemism for it?
I love that.
Yeah. But mainly the only reason that people use that phrase is so that it doesn't sound like you're being,
pushed aside.
because you don't want, because ghostwriting, and if I'm sitting here on a radio interview talking about ghostwriting, ghosts are supposed to be secret.
Right.
And so you don't want to feel like you're betraying any sort of trust. But my name is, usually on the cover or the spine, or it's not, I'm not a secret, but I'm essentially a ghostwriter, and I do not take offense of that term at all. I'm honored to be able to do what I do.
How does one get into ghostwriting?
Well, you drop out of 3 colleges.
Okay, check.
That's the first step. And then, I just started writing. I wrote 2 books. Winston Churchill has a great quote. He said, I am the writer of rare books. I just never intended them to be rare. And so I wrote 2 books under my own name. And one of them sold modestly well. And then the other one didn't sell very well at all. But in the process, Anne Romney read one of my books, and Sarah Palin read that same book. And I got connected to them because of, just through my writing. And they were, Anne Romney gave me my first chance. She asked me to jump on the campaign bus in 2008. And we tried to write a book. It was going to be used during the campaign, but obviously they lost, and nothing ever came of the book. But it got me going on the path of celebrity collaboration. Mm-hmm. And then after the Romney sort of disappointment, spending all that time writing and not having a book ever hit the shelf.
Yeah.
I was contacted by the vice president of HarperCollins, who asked me if I was interested in writing a very young person's book. And they wouldn't tell me who it was. And so I said, definitely, even though I had just adopted a child from Africa like 6 months ago.
You have enough on your plate.
Yeah.
I had enough on my plate. I sort of thought I would give up my writing career, because it wasn't that great. And I wanted to, be able to help my daughter from Africa learn how to, learn English. And so when I got the call, it was so random. I thought, well, I'll just keep my hat in this, I'll just keep my eyes on this and see if it's an opportunity. So I said that I would be willing to talk to that celebrity. And at the time I thought it was Miley Cyrus, because
Mm-hmm.
I live in her county, because we're here in Tennessee near near Music City. And I thought, well, maybe, why else would they call me? I'm in rural Tennessee. But it turned out to be Bristol Palin, and which was a huge shock. And
what year was this? This was 2008 as well?
This was about probably 2010.
Oh, okay. So a couple of years after the campaign then.
Yeah. So I had sort of a book under a sort of a celebrity collaboration under my belt, but not really. Like, I hadn't done anything. And so I got to talk to Bristol Palin on the phone, and we did an interview, and it was a very funny interview because she was at Walmart with Trip on her hip, and I was in my car trying to pretend like I didn't have children because I understood that having children seemed like a disadvantage because they wanted me to travel very soon to Alaska. And so I jumped in the car, and I was trying, my kids were at home. I think it was a snow day. And anyway, so I got the job, and within 3 days I was in Alaska, and I lived with Sarah Palin for a month in her house as we collaborated on Bristol's book.
Nancy, I didn't know you and I had so much in common. I have also met Anne Romney. We're very in my life before this, I worked on a ranch, and she and Mitt came out in Montana. We were talking about that before we were recording. Oh yeah.
Oh, nice. Were you out there with Were you out there with her when she was when her multiple sclerosis had really acted up and she was learning how to ride on her horse, or was it maybe later?
Yeah. It was in summer of 2008. And I was working on a different ranch, and I got work like in a kitchen and a nearby ranch. I don't. This is a weird life I've lived. And it was at a guy who owned the property. He's really big in the beef industry. Owns this gorgeous piece of land. And Mitt and Anne Romney came out every summer for like this big conservative shindig thing. And I met her, and she was very nice, and she's wearing a cute little American flag jacket, and she told me that I was a really good dancer.
Look at that. Look at that.
Basically, I'm famous, and...
She never told me that.
I can't believe she didn't tell you about me.
So when you're living in Alaska for a month...
Wait, you don't want to talk about my life in Montana anymore?
I can't believe we would have more than 10 seconds about Montana in any conversation.
We're coming back to mules later.
When you're living for a month with Sarah Palin, with the Palin family and stuff, what's that collaborative process like with Bristol? Like, how do you learn to channel her voice? What's the difference between, talking to her to get the information you need and then writing it down for what later became her book?
Well, we just sat and talked and talked and talked, and I recorded every word she said. And then I transcribed every word she said. Ooh. And then you sort of shape that into a book. And also she had written a lot of, in your life, you might send a lot of text or keep a lot of emails. She had all that sort of, that digital data that sort of you could trace, the stories of her life through those types of text and emails. And so Bristol, being as young as she was, we texted a lot. I mean, even if we spent almost all of the month together, but if she was upstairs and I was downstairs, we'd text, and so when you're actually texting, that's actual words that you can just copy and put into a document. So anyway, a lot of times, depending on the person, they have more or less influence on, or they do more or less of the actual writing. Like I did a great book called God's Double Agent by Bob Fu, Shishu Fu. He's a Chinese political dissident. And English was not his native tongue. And so he wasn't able to write a word, even though he was very talented as a writer in China. So I felt it was a big honor for me to be able to take his story and to put it into English for him in a beautiful way. And so it just depends on what author you're dealing with when you're talking about how little or how much they're actually writing.
Is this a process you developed over, doing this sort of collaboration over time? I'll record it, I'll transcribe it, and then finesse it into a book? Or is that something you kind of did for the first time there? Like, where do you learn how to do that?
I never learned until I did it. And so my friend Nathan Whitaker, who is the celebrity collaborator for Tim Tebow and Tony Dungy and others, he gave me a tip on, just a certain kind of recording device to use. And we had like an hour conversation before I flew to Alaska. Actually, he was doing the Tebow book as I was in Alaska. So we would call and commiserate and compare notes. But it's just, if you write down everything that somebody says and then put it in a story form and clean up the grammar, it's pretty fun. I mean, you can get everything, their inflections, their unique words. Occasionally I always accidentally stick a y'all into every book that I do. And so even the Chinese political dissident was like, I don't think I used that word.
What's the Chinese translation for that one? Yeah.
So it's just it's an interesting process, but I've gotten to know and love so many really interesting people.
Is it hard to kind of start that relationship? Because that feels like something that's really intimate if you're writing about like somebody's whole life.
And reading their love notes and things like that.
Is that hard to build that, or do you clearly are a very personable person. That probably makes it easier, do you think?
Well, I have made so many mistakes. And honestly, these books are about mistakes. So if you look at any book, I think that you should not write books in order to make your brand better or to get across certain political points. I think those are boring. And so every time I sit down with an author, I have the same talk. I say, you have royally screwed up in your life, and so have I. Mm-hmm. We don't have to tell everybody all of our junk, but we should be honest and truthful in the way that we present our stories. Without an eye to make us necessarily look better, but to tell the true story. And most of the people so far that I've written for are Christians. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of have a different view on maybe, I don't know if we do have a different view or not, but I'll tell you what the view is. That it's God's story. And you don't have to make yourself look better, because it is what it is, and he's doing what he's doing. And so you can have a very God-glorifying story that makes you look like an abject idiot. But if it's God-glorifying, then it's very valuable and beautiful to be honest about the things that you've done.
With that kind of, when you say that, what it makes me think of is like a photographer trying to capture what, like, not like a glamour shot, but what somebody really looks like and all their imperfections. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Yeah, but with the idea that people with their imperfections are very beautiful.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And
you're not photoshopping the image.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be tempted to do that. Like, even in my own books, like if you read my books, which I'm sure you have not, since only my immediate my immediate family has.
That's cool. My parents haven't read anything I've written either. It's
Ditto.
But when you're writing, you have this tendency to make yourself look better than you are. Yeah. And, like even in this interview, like if I'm good for an interview, maybe for lunch, the more you get to know me, you'll see all of the various imperfections and flaws that are obvious to my friends and family. And so instead of leading with this perfection that doesn't actually exist, you lead with the brokenness. So my favorite first line of any book that I've done is Bristol Palin's. Mm-hmm. And the first line of her book is, "I lied to my mother." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was the first thing that she did that caused her to go down a path where she ended up, having some very bad decisions that changed the rest of her life. Right. And everybody knows that, we make mistakes. Everybody knows what Bristol's mistakes were. And so why don't you just start out the book saying, okay, here it is.
Yeah, just lay it out there. We already know people are thinking this, so I might as well put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of speaking about the Palins, like clearly Sarah Palin was a very polarizing figure on the political scene. And you're somebody who has spent time with her personally, whereas the most of us have just kind of seen what she's said on TV and in speeches. Is there something we're all getting wrong about Sarah, or is it just a matter of like she's put out who she is and take it or leave it?
I honestly think you probably have a good feel for her.
Really?
I wasn't surprised when I met her. When I met her, I anticipated, I wasn't sure, but the opinion that I had of her before I went to Alaska was only solidified when I got to live with her. Of course, my opinion of her was very high.
Sure.
But
she ended up being who you thought she was, for better or for worse.
I mean, good for her, right?
Yeah, she was very kind. I mean, they're very kind and down to earth, and eat at the same restaurants that. Yeah, I don't know what kind of restaurants y'all eat at. But the same restaurants I eat at.
Right.
And, really fancy ones.
Yeah. And just very loving and kind and down to earth. And Sean Lowe, who's America's favorite Bachelor, whose book is on shelves now, he said that everyone says that the camera. That the people on the Bachelor show, actually, if they seem bad on the show, they're bad. If they seem good on the show, they're good, because the camera doesn't really lie. And that was his opinion on reality TV. I think it's slightly different with politics, because after I've spent so much time with the Palins and the Romneys, I know that it is very difficult to get the true story past a media that has its own agenda. And so when I went to the Palins, for example, I had a lot of misconceptions about things that happened. Like I would say, oh, well, this must have happened because I can read about it and here's a picture. And I know that this is true because here's the newspaper article that I've read. I've done research about this incident. And they would look at it and they'd say, that's a photoshopped photo.
Right.
Can't you tell? That's a fake article. That never happened. And I'm not the least, I may sound like it, but I'm not the least sophisticated person on the planet. And then to realize that I'd been fooled by, the media, it was a little discomforting. But I had a high opinion of them before I went, and I have an even higher opinion now. And the same way with the Romneys, I love both families so much.
Let me bring up, because this is I'm sure people are wondering this, like, if we're interviewing you, this is something they're gonna ask us about anyway, so we'll get it out there.
Okay.
Yes, Sarah Palin, obviously we probably have a lot of disagreements about in terms of her politics. With the Romneys, I disagree with his politics. I don't really have as much of a problem with the persona he's projected
very
in
nice
general.
guy.
Right.
My close personal friend.
But here's the question, like, is there anything you could say to, I guess, our audience that might change our view of Sarah Palin? Is there anything we don't know about her that might change any negative connotation we have with her name?
Probably not. I mean, to be completely honest, I think you hate her or you love her.
Yeah.
And, and so it's interesting because the Palins and the Romneys are not that different in terms of their ideological positions. It's mostly just their personalities and the way that they do things. Sure. I'm not sure. I get a lot of pushback on, I get this question a lot, and I always feel like if people hate Sarah Palin, they would probably hate me. But I'm not sure if that's the case. Like,
Have you found that? Have you found that to be true?
Well, I have. It depends. Like if I gave you a list of my beliefs,
Yeah.
And you just evaluated them and sent them back with red marks on them, right, you probably wouldn't like me that much. But I have found, and actually through Patheos. So Patheos is a really amazing place because you have this opportunity to speak to people like we are now, with whom we have huge ideological differences. And it's a really unique opportunity because it used to be that you would disagree with your neighbor about politics. But now, because the geographic and ideological segregation that has happened naturally over the past, 3 decades, has made it almost impossible to have a conversation that's meaningful with people that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And so, what we're doing right now, I think if you sat down with Sarah Palin, you would love her. And
I don't disagree with you at all.
No,
I'm sure I think Jess feels the same way. I think having those conversations in person and when it's away from sound bites and stuff, I think that would happen a lot. And we've had those conversations on this show
Take the words out of my mouth.
people we fundamentally disagree with a lot of things about.
Yeah.
But I would totally go get a beer with.
Right.
And it would be a blast.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk mules.
and that's one of the reasons why I love books. Sarah Palin's most recent book that dealt with Christmas, Good Tidings and Great Joy, was a wonderful, I think, even keeled book that was beautiful and full of truth and full of grace. And it focused on freedom, which I think all of us should be able to unite behind freedom. Mm-hmm. And so I can't speak to her whole body of work, but I know that every interaction I've had with her has been full of grace and truth and kindness. You just don't get to see that. I have the honor of being able to see these people up close. And so it's hard to see from a distance, I guess.
So Nancy, when I found out you were coming on the show, I was chatting with a couple of my coworkers, and I was like, I'm going to be talking to, the ghostwriter of like a couple of the Palin's books, and their first question was like, is she like ideologically and politically aligned with them, or is she not? And I was like, I should have done research before I told you this because I have no idea. I'm curious. Kind of what I thought about it was like, I don't know, if somebody paid, I'm a writer myself, and if somebody was like, hey, Jess, I will pay you X amount of money to write for somebody you don't agree with, I would totally take up on that offer because
It's
I
a
know,
business.
it's a job.
It's a job.
How do you feel about that? Like, would you, if Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Hemant asked you to write a book about their life, would you be like, it's a job, or would you feel uncomfortable?
Well, it's interesting you bring up Hillary Clinton. When it leaked that she was doing another book, I got a call from some big publisher saying, we have another celebrity. It's another political memoir. We're not going to tell you who it is, but we want to put your name in the hat. Would you be willing?
Yeah.
And I was hoping that, it was insane. Hillary Clinton would have to be drunk to hire me to write a memoir because
Yeah.
I am a conservative evangelical, person, Republican. I was thinking, if Hillary Clinton, I would love to tell her story. Think of the drama and, being the most powerful woman.
Right.
One of the most powerful women in the world and facing the things that she's faced. If she wanted to tell a true memoir, as I said, I'm not interested in brand management, but
Right.
in really telling the story of what's happened, I would love to do that. I would love to tell, like, for example, Kobe Bryant. I would love to tell his story. He's
Yeah.
not a Christian guy, but I would love to tell his story. He has an amazing story. So there are some stories that I would love to tell. There are other stories, however, that I have been approached to tell that I've turned down because I did not believe in their message.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be honest. I'm not, like, for example, there was one person who'd been married and divorced 7 times, and I don't have a problem. It's very likely that you could get married and divorce legitimately, have a bad string of luck. But it didn't seem that I didn't want to get into the stories of why I was wronged 7 different times by 7 different men.
Oh my God, I'm dying
Right.
of curiosity right now.
I know. And
Yeah.
then there are other people who, like, maybe some famous celebrities who just come out of divorces and they want to have these, like, I am woman, hear me roar. I didn't need him anyway type stories. I'm not interested in that type of story because I don't feel that right after you get a divorce is the right time to tell your story.
Yeah. You need a little bit of time to reflect.
But
Yeah.
to be fair, if you wrote with a Bachelor star, and that's not exactly like a tale as old as time classic love story.
Yes, but it's interesting. The book is not a love story. So that book is called For the Right Reasons. It's the story of what happened when his sister submitted Sean Lowe's name to the show, and all the way through the marriage. So, the wedding. So I got to go to the Bachelor wedding, and I got to bring my Iraq War veteran husband as my +1. And so that's not a tale as old as time, but it's also not a sad tale. So, like, if you're talking about divorce, which would necessarily talk about failure and your spouse's failure, I don't want to be in the middle of that. But talking about a wedding, that's a success. Now, it doesn't mean that the people that I've written books for are going to live these amazing moral lives. It doesn't mean necessarily that any of the stuff that we write about will last. But what it does mean is that this is a really good story, and at this moment in time, here it is. And God continues to write our stories with ups and downs. And I do not feel responsible for anything that happens after, our last page.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you wrote Sarah Palin's, you collaborate with Sarah Palin on Good Tidings and Great Joy, which I've read. You were kind enough to send me a copy of it. And it has a lot of stuff in there that about atheists and
He
how...
was so excited when he got your book. He called me.
I was.
He's like, I got it. I'm going to read it. It's going to be great.
And it had
Didn't Sarah Palin sign it for you?
She did. She was kind enough to sign it. It was...
Yes.
No one can believe that I'm actually excited to have that book, but I really am.
No, it wasn't ironic excitement. It was
yeah.
sincere.
And she writes a lot about, atheists armed with lawyers and how we're kind of going against the freedom
That's
of
me.
religion. Yeah.
Yes,
Well, here's the question I have. That book got a lot of criticism, as I'm pretty sure anything Sarah Palin writes would get a lot of criticism. How do you react to the criticisms of these books? Because, they're not criticizing the writing. They're criticizing the things she says in there. And I'm wondering how personally you take those things.
Oh,
What's your
yeah.
reaction when you see those reviews and commentaries on it?
Oh, I take it super personally. I really do. Just to be honest. So, Yeah, because I stand by every word of that book. I mean, like that is a very well researched book, and like I really take care in these books. So at some point, it'd be interesting to talk to you about the stuff in there that might sound off to you.
Right.
Recently, I had a conversation with Dale McGowan, the Atheist channel manager.
Yeah.
We met in Denver.
Right.
And we had a very interesting conversation, and our conversation sort of shed some light on why maybe if you're similar to Dale, why some of those things would raise your eyebrow. But I think that it would be an interesting conversation to have. But I stand by everything that are in these books.
When you say you stand by it, just to clarify, what are you standing by? I mean, it's one thing about the facts and the research, but like, do you mean her opinions as well?
Well, I mean, I don't know all of her opinions. So,
right.
So I have a very limited effect on these people. They live their lives independently of me, sadly.
Yeah.
So like whatever's in that book, I think is right and true.
Okay.
Now, there might be a tonal difference, but I don't think there's a really bad tone in that book. Now, angry atheists with lawyers obviously exist. What Dale told me in Denver was that it's a very small percentage of you guys.
Right, and I would agree with him on that. Right.
Yeah, and that was my question to Dale. So this is
I'm
me
too
and my
poor to
actual
afford a lawyer.
Yeah, so I said to Dale, I said, what is it about atheists that you think I misunderstand that you would like for me to know? And that's what he told me. He said
that's interesting.
He said that I don't understand that there's a very small minority of people who are filing these lawsuits. And that everybody else would just really rather live peacefully. But interestingly, the things that are in her book are based on actual cases. And so we didn't make it up. We didn't try to take a stereotype and beef it up. We were taking actual cases and talking about the cases. So I can see where that would be both off-putting and upsetting if you feel like you're being unfairly stereotyped. But that's the type of thing that I think it's really fun to talk about.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, and this is the question then. So when you see the criticism of these ideas that she's putting forth, that in a sense you're putting forth as well, do you go out and search for these reviews? I mean, obviously, if the book is out, you want to know what people are saying, but what is your reaction to them? Is it just like, no, these people don't get it? Or is it ever like, well, maybe I should have explained that more clearly or anything like that?
Well, I have incredible confidence in my writing ability to explain stuff. So, like, I really have taken great care. I mean, I'm a 3-time college dropout, so I'm not saying that I'm this rhetorical queen. But I know that Sarah Palin takes great care in her words in these books. And so in Bristol and Shawn Johnson and Shishu Fu, everybody, we really labor over these books. So, like, for example, when Sarah's book came out, within 30 minutes of it hitting Amazon, it had, 1,000 5-star reviews, which could not be true, and 1,000 1-star reviews, which could not be true.
Right.
And
they haven't read the book.
Yeah, and I bet if you looked to this day, it is exactly half and half. I mean, who knows?
Right.
But I don't actually read any of the reviews because people will bring me all of the criticism that you could process in a life. Like I tweeted something yesterday that, I got so much hate about, and it's about, I got hate from my people over a tweet that I did last night because I was talking about incarceration rates of Black people.
Right, which they talked about on the Oscars. So
I just tweeted out something about that. People went nuts. And so, these days you don't have to go searching for insults.
Right.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start some controversy here for a second.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Lynn Vincent, you said you wrote Good Tidings and Great Joy with Sarah Palin. There's another conservative Christian writer, Lynn Vincent, who wrote Going Rogue with Sarah Palin. Are you two like super enemies? Because let's start some stuff here.
Throw down the gauntlet.
Yeah. We're like the Crips and the Bloods.
Right. Is that the case?
No. I think she actually. No, I don't know, Lynn.
Yeah.
I am not a super ghostwriter. She is probably. She has to be the most prominent ghostwriter. I guess ghosts aren't out there talking about everything. But,
right.
But
she also wrote Colton Burpo's book, Heaven is for Real, I believe.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's written, probably half the books on the bookshelves at Books a Million. So
Yeah.
no, I don't know her, but I'm sure she's lovely.
Oh, okay.
So you mentioned in passing that you wrote with Shawn Johnson as well, whom I
Yes.
adore. I love the Olympics and I love gymnastics and I love Shawn Johnson. When you go to write a book about an athlete as opposed to like a public figure like Bristol, like do you start from similar places? Do you kind of have a thought of everybody's human and I just want to tell their story? Or
Yes.
Is it different?
No, it's not different at all. I think all stories are the same. They all start with brokenness. So like I went to Shawn Johnson and I thought, what's the worst moment of your life? That's where we're starting.
That's tough.
Doesn't this sound fun?
Oh my God.
I mean, it
Cannot
sounds
wait
like
for you
you
to
would
write
hear.
my
It
memoirs.
sounds like you would hear, a ton of stuff. How much is left on the cutting room floor with all of these people?
Okay, so a lot. So I'm doing a book that's coming up because I just don't want to be dishonest. And so when I write, I tell people I was like I'm like their priest or their bartender or their best friend. Pick pick which category I would fall into. Like Anne Romney, I probably wouldn't be her bartender, but
Yeah.
but you have to tell me everything because I don't want to lie. So like if you did something really bad and I write an entire chapter not knowing about it, which makes my chapter sort of false,
Yeah.
that's not good. So tell me whatever that horrible thing is. And we can pray for forgiveness. And then we can write a true chapter without having to tell people our business. You can obscure things because, people don't want to know all your junk.
Right.
But you have to be able to write honestly. And so, that's the tact I take for every book is just tell me the truth. So I did that recently with a book that's coming up that I shall not explain who it is.
Sure.
And just tell me everything. And so help me, she told me everything. We were so depressed for like a week.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a book, about politics. So it's not something that's necessarily all of this stuff necessarily should be in the book, but it helps inform. So if you've been a victim of some sort of abuse or if you've been in this terribly dramatic situation, it helps inform your personality. And so, so I feel like I'm sort of carrying people's burdens as we do the books.
It's got to
But I
be
think
freeing and relieving in a sense for them too
Yeah, I
to kind of
bet.
get it out there.
Yeah, it's very cathartic. And the way that I look at it, because I'm so connected and also disconnected, I can send them emails and say, you do realize this. And I can point out these overarching sort of themes to their lives or ironies or, just things that they've never seen. And they'd say, oh, I've never even thought of that before. And it'd be so blatantly obvious to any observer. So
You
it's so
function
fun.
as a therapist in a sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. I don't know if I'm that talented, but I wish. But yeah, it's super fun.
Do you ever get pushback on that? If you're saying to somebody like, okay, I'm not going to necessarily air your dirty laundry, but I also need to know about it. Do they ever say like, do you get pushback?
Not really, but I really carefully select my books now. In fact, I'm not sure how long I'll do this. I'm doing a book right now that's about a murder, and it's this story. It was in the New York Times. It's a story of someone, a man shot his fiancée, a 19-year-old fiancée, in Florida, and I'm doing the victim's. The victim's mother wants to write a book because she forgave the killer. And it was, and it's this beautiful story of forgiveness and restorative justice and about the criminal justice system being broken. And so we're going to talk about some really hefty, serious topics. But as the mother of a teenage girl myself, I have been stricken with just a heaviness over this book. I just got back from Florida where I got to go to the prison and visit with the person who pulled the trigger. And it was heavy on all counts. And I'm not sure how many times you can take on the personality of someone else without losing your bearings. So I don't know how Lynn Vincent does it. I've done about 12. I'm not sure how long I can do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you write them in first person?
Yes. So
Okay.
instead of saying he shot, instead of saying her daughter was shot, it's my daughter was shot.
Right.
And I almost cannot even say those words, let alone, be in that mindset for months and months and months as I try to absorb the feelings of what that must have been like for them.
Let me move on to a happier topic then. You and your husband worked on Mitt Romney's campaign, at least maybe, I don't know if as staffers, but you supported him, and you founded a group called Evangelicals for Mitt. And I'm wondering, was there any conflict? I mean, obviously you got over it, but was there any conflict between your evangelical Christian faith and his family's Mormon faith?
Yes, when my husband came home to our Philadelphia apartment and said that he'd found a presidential candidate that he wanted to support, this, by the way, was in 2005.
Yeah.
And he said his name is Mitt Romney, and I was familiar with him, and he got to the point where he said, and he's a Mormon. And I said, oh, too bad. I will never vote for a Mormon.
Right. So what happened?
Yeah, well, I sort of started thinking more clearly about the subject. What I thought was very tribal. Like if you are like me, then you must be really awesome. Mm-hmm. Now I almost think the opposite because I know my own heart. But with the Romneys, with the Mormon situation, what my husband is super smart and super kind and super patient, and we sort of talked through it. And he said that you do not vote for someone because they're the most Christian candidate. Mm-hmm. For example, when Jimmy Carter was running against Ronald Reagan, you had a Baptist Sunday school teacher who was running against a Hollywood actor who was divorced and whose current wife used astrology.
Right.
And so if you just put that down on paper, a Christian person who was reasonable would vote for Jimmy Carter, but Jimmy Carter did not necessarily reflect the values that I hold as a Christian in terms of being pro-life and other things. And so we never historically have voted for the quote unquote most Christian candidate. Mm-hmm. Now but there are some theologies that would probably be deal breakers. For example, if somebody this is absurd, but if someone belonged to the hypothetical Church of Killing Canadians, I assume that if I voted for that person, that we would not have similar political beliefs because that I don't necessarily believe in killing all Canadians. And, so there's some religions that probably would have tenets to their faith that would be contrary to the tenets of my faith, right. But Mormonism is not one of them. And so we were on the front lines telling evangelicals that Mormons were our co-belligerents in fighting for the values that we deeply care about. And in fact, I think I wrote an article called In Good Conscience, Can Christians Vote for Episcopalians or Methodists or Baptists? Because Mormons invariably are better in terms of the issues of the day and politics than any of us are.
So there are some religious deal breakers, but his Mormonism wasn't one of them.
Right.
But if we kept walking that line out, what if an atheist candidate, but who politically aligned with you in every way, was running against, say, Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton? Where would you find yourself, do you think?
I'd have evangelicals for atheist, whoever.
Really?
Yeah.
This
is
a thing we've had to deal with all the time because there are no big political candidates who are atheists. So we find ourselves having to vote for someone we may theologically disagree with, but hopefully a lot of our values are in line, which is hard to find in general. But
right. But also, like, if there was an atheist running for president who didn't
reflect our views,
right, then I wouldn't feel obligated. But
you hope atheism isn't the first reason you're electing a president.
Right.
It's like, that's interesting, but let's see what their agenda is.
Right.
Right. And I'd be out there. So like when we were out there on the front lines of this, we got so much hate mail from people that you would think would be our best friends. And invariably we'd get hate mail from people who'd say, you don't care about this nation. And of course, my husband is in Iraq at the time fighting.
Oh, God.
You're not patriotic. Yeah. You don't know anything about God. We hate you. We wish you'd just shut up so that America could be better. And then they'd have one of those automatic signature lines. And it'd be like
Bible verse.
In Christian love.
Oh, no.
I've gotten those emails too.
Yeah.
So
it's just awful.
When you're part of a campaign and your whole family is invested so heavily in Mitt Romney winning the presidency in 2012, what happens? And ask this because I haven't been part of a campaign before like this.
Me neither.
What happens when your candidate loses when you think this is the best person for the nation?
Well, it's really profoundly depressing.
Sure.
And there are pictures of us from the AP. We were in Boston when he lost, and we'd worked for literally 8 years
Yeah.
on this. And so our kids, for all of their memory, had been a part of this effort. And so there's a picture of all of our family except Naomi, who was too little to bring, and we were all weeping. And so people still Instagram pictures of my son weeping all over the place. But,
That's awful.
but yeah, it's just profoundly disappointing, and it takes a whole lot to get over. But it's good. I mean, I really think as a Christian that it is helpful. Failure is super helpful because there's nothing that I can do that's going to save the world, and there's nothing that Mitt Romney is going to do to save the world. And so it is very helpful to realize where you're placing your hope. And if you're placing your hope in politics, which is what I honestly, confessionally did for 8 years, then it is misguided, and it would be just as empty than had he won. You know, I really wish he had won. I think he would have been an amazing president. But you just have to comfort yourself knowing that, you don't put your faith in chariots or horses or presidents or Mormon presidential candidates or, evangelical presidential candidates, that you have to put your trust in God.
Were you disappointed that Mitt Romney said recently he wasn't going to run in 2016?
I was more disappointed than I thought I would be, honestly.
Okay.
I was, because he'd said, no, I'm not going to run. And then he surprised everybody and said he was thinking about it. So I was on that call.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, this is not going to happen. And then when he said this is not going to happen, I was so depressed.
Sure.
But I don't have anybody to back. I'm going to be a political orphan this time, but it's going to be fun because that means I can criticize everybody.
Right. Is that the fact that you're probably not going to support anyone, at least with your time? You know what I mean? Is that a result of the disappointment you felt in 2012? Or is it because the slate of candidates who are out there right now for Republicans, none of them really moves you to support them?
Well, I don't believe in anybody right now. There's nobody that's, coming. Of course, Sarah Palin said that she might run for president. So I believe in her. I think she's wonderful. But
I would get behind that.
Sarah Palin?
I would totally be fine with her running.
Yes,
I think that would be good for my side.
Yeah. Yes, well, did you see her on Saturday Night Live, how she sort of poked fun at that?
I did, and she did a nice job on that show.
I have a lot of respect for people who can go on and watch somebody make fun of them.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
She's a great sport when it comes to comedy shows.
But also Tina Fey was so
great.
funny.
Yeah.
She's great. But so I'm not sure who's going to run, but I haven't found anybody that is, who looks like they're actually preparing to run that really excites me. And honestly, I have 3 kids and a career. I did the whole Romney thing just because I really believed in it. And if I really believed in something again, I would do it again. I think it's important to fight for your beliefs and to put effort there, even if it's a failure.
One last question for you, which is you're a huge fan of Survivor, which I am too. And that's the reaction I get from everybody I say that to. What do you think about the new season with the white collars and blue collars and no collars?
Oh my gosh. No, I don't even know this. I have a book deadline on March 1st and then one on May 1st.
See, so nobody watches it, Hemmant.
Everyone watches it.
No, I'm so sorely sad to disappoint you.
Got it.
Do you have way too much The Bachelor?
Okay. That's awesome.
Can you get Hemmant on the show?
Can you get me on the show? You probably know Mark Burnett, right? He's a Christian.
Oh, by the way, my husband, David French, Harvard law grad, Iraq war vet, tried out for Survivor. Did I tell you this?
How did that work out? I mean, he wasn't on the show, but how did that go?
Well, he was at Cornell. He was teaching at Cornell Law School. He hired the Cornell film crew to
tape his audition video.
Yes, and his audition video was "Law is War," and he did his law class like a WWF commercial.
Oh, I love it.
And so he took up a chair and broke it over one of his students' desk. And so I think it was going to be the Survivor Africa where Colby was a contestant and won, I think. And sadly,
so early in the Survivor run.
Yeah. So I tell him that if he had been a contestant on Survivor, he would forever be known as the contestant who stole the beef jerky. Or
Season 2, I remember it well.
Oh my God.
It's
Yeah,
sad that
you
I
know-
know this.
I don't know, it's crazy. So I'm very thankful that he did not go on Survivor, but he is sorely disappointed. It is his biggest disappointment, I think.
It is mine too. I submitted my audition tape like when I turned 18, I submitted an audition tape. They did not select me. I didn't get a
That's it.
call back, and now I need my way in, and I don't know what that
Wait,
is.
I know your way in. You've got to take your clothes off.
Oh. Then I don't know why she's laughing so much, but
No, it's a serious thing. You know, you look.
I know you're right.
Yeah, so just do some workout, get
Yeah.
those abs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hammett,
That's
work on
it.
your abs.
That's going to happen.
Hammett, if you get on Survivor, I'll take good care of the site. I'll take good care of the podcast. We'll carry on without you.
I would stop everything I'm doing and go on that show.
I know
don't
you
care what I'm
would.
doing. All right.
That would be awesome. I would support you.
Thank you. Nancy,
Evangelicals for him.
that would be awesome. Oh my God.
I've never been so happy as I am right now.
Nancy, thank you so much for your time. And we'll plug your books on the show notes. And you also are the managing editor of the Patheos Evangelical channel. Is that correct? Or the family channel?
Yeah, the family channel and the entertainment channel.
Awesome. We'll plug those sites as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nancy.
Sounds great.
Appreciate
Had
it.
fun, guys. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast for friendlyatheist.com. This episode was taped at Cinnamon Sound Studios in Aurora, Illinois, and the music was written and performed by Brad Chagdis. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant, that's He-Man-T. We appreciate your support. I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blumke. We hope you'll join us next time.